At a crowded backyard party, Emma slapped her husband Mark so hard the room went silent. Plates clattered, the cake tipped, and his parents stood in shock. Without a word, they turned and walked out the gate, leaving whispers trailing behind them. Guests stared at Emma's trembling hands and the red mark on Mark's face. She had discovered a charge on their shared account that morning and believed he was hiding money again. Mark stayed quiet, picking up shards from the broken dish. To everyone watching, silence looked like guilt. What happened next will expose far more than anyone expected. Emma wasn't the type to cause a scene. She worked long shifts as a nurse in Dallas, coming home tired but proud of the life she and Mark were building. Raised in a modest family, she learned early that honesty mattered more than appearances. Every paycheck was carefully budgeted, every promise kept. Friends admired her steady nature and kindness. That's why the slap at the party shocked everyone. It went against everything Emma stood for. To understand why she lost control that night, you have to see the values she lived by each day. Mark, her husband, was the opposite in many ways. He sold real estate in Dallas, thriving on charm and quick deals. Where Emma saw discipline, Mark saw opportunity. He could be persuasive, sometimes too persuasive, especially when bending the truth made life easier. Over the years, Emma overlooked his small lies, telling herself they weren't worth a fight. But lately, those cracks had widened into habits she couldn't ignore. The more Mark smiled his way through problems, the more Emma felt she was carrying the weight of honesty alone, and that weight was about to crush her. Mark's mother, Patricia, was always part of the tension. From the moment Emma married into the family, Patricia treated her with polite smiles that hid sharp edges. At gatherings, she compared Emma to more polished women she knew, making Emma feel small. During the housewarming, Patricia floated from guest to guest, whispering critiques about Emma's outfit, her cooking, even her posture. Emma caught the glances, the smirks, and felt her chest tighten. Patricia's quiet disapproval had always been there, but that night it wrapped around Emma like a noose, leaving her cornered before the explosion ever came. The morning of the party, Emma's unease had already started. Over coffee, she checked their joint account and saw a charge from a downtown hotel. Her stomach tightened. When she asked, Mark brushed it off as business, flashing that confident grin that usually ended arguments. But this time the answer felt hollow. Emma carried that doubt all day, even while setting out food and arranging flowers for the guests. By evening, Patricia's constant barbs mixed with the thought of that hotel bill, and Emma's patience frayed like a rope about to snap. The housewarming was meant to be a proud milestone. Neighbors admired the spacious living room, co-workers praised the furniture, and relatives nodded at the decor. Emma had spent weeks hunting for bargains, stretching every dollar to make the house feel like home. But as guests complimented the details, Mark casually took credit. He laughed, saying Emma had just tagged along on shopping trips. People chuckled politely, but Emma felt her effort erased. With Patricia watching smugly, the party that was supposed to honor their new beginning became another stage for Emma's patience to be tested. When the toasts began, Emma hoped for a moment of recognition. Instead, Patricia raised her glass and praised Mark for providing such a beautiful home, her words slicing Emma out of the picture. Guests clapped, unaware of the sting behind the compliment. Emma's throat tightened, her smile forced. All she could think about was the unexplained hotel bill, now colliding with Patricia's constant dismissal. The party lights felt too bright, the laughter too sharp. Every second, the pressure grew heavier, pushing Emma toward a breaking point she never imagined she'd reach in front of so many eyes. The moment came suddenly. Mark, already basking in his mother's praise, lifted his glass and joked about Emma's watchdog spending, claiming she tracked every dollar like a drill sergeant. Guests laughed lightly, but the joke pierced deeper than anyone realized. Emma's chest burned as humiliation piled on top of suspicion and silence. Without thinking, she stood straighter, her hand rising before she could stop it. The sharp crack of her palm against Mark's cheek silenced the entire backyard. Gasps followed, eyes wide. In that instant, Emma's restraint vanished, and nothing would be the same again. The slap still echoed when Patricia shot to her feet, her face flushed with fury. Mark's father followed, jaw tight, his silence louder than words. Without asking what happened, without giving Emma a chance to explain, they turned and strode out the gate. Guests shifted awkwardly, whispers rising behind cupped hands. To everyone watching, their exit looked like a judgment against Emma. Her cheeks burned hotter than Mark's. The people she most wanted to respect her had left her standing in shame. And the party, meant to unite families, now sat in stunned, broken silence. For a moment, Emma thought Mark would explode. Instead, he calmly bent down and gathered the shattered plate from the grass. He didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself, didn't even look angry. The quiet unsettled her more than yelling ever could. Guests whispered that his silence looked like guilt, proof he had been caught. Others shook their heads at Emma, whispering she had gone too far. Emma's pulse slowed, thinking maybe the worst had passed. But the calm on Mark's face wasn't surrender, it was the mask of someone holding back a deeper truth. Later that night, long after the guests had gone, Emma noticed Mark's laptop glowing on the kitchen counter. Curiosity mixed with guilt as she opened it, searching for answers. What she found stopped her cold. A folder showed months of wire transfers, large sums moved discreetly. But they weren't to another woman. They were payments to cover his father's gambling debts, each labeled with vague notes about loans and settlements. The hotel charge had been a meeting with a lender, not an affair. The story she thought she knew shifted under her feet, rewriting the meaning of everything. Emma waited in the dim kitchen until Mark returned from taking out the trash. Her voice was low, steady, but shaking with hurt as she asked about the transfers. Mark sighed heavily, admitting the truth. His father had been drowning in gambling debt for years. He had secretly covered it to protect the family name, fearing Patricia's judgment and the fallout if it became public. He hadn't told Emma because he didn't want her dragged into the mess. Emma stood frozen. The slap she delivered hours earlier suddenly felt like a blow aimed at the wrong person. The truth didn't stay hidden for long. A relative overheard Emma and Mark's late-night argument and whispered the secret through the family. Soon Patricia's carefully crafted image of control began to unravel. People who once admired her strict composure now whispered about her husband's gambling and her blind arrogance. Emma noticed the shift, how the same guests who smirked at her earlier now looked at Patricia with suspicion. Patricia's polite smile faltered, her usual sharpness dulled by fear. The perfect matriarch mask she wore for decades finally showed cracks that couldn't be patched over. A week later, both families gathered for dinner, tension thick as smoke. Mark stood, clearing his throat, and told the truth in front of everyone. He explained that the gambling debts belonged to his father, and he had been quietly paying them to protect the family. Emma's slap, he said, came from hurt and suspicion, not malice. The room fell silent as eyes shifted to Patricia. For years, she had painted Emma as unworthy, yet it was her own household drowning in secrets. Relatives whispered, heads shook, and for the first time Patricia had nothing left to say. In the days that followed, the fallout spread quickly. Some relatives quietly distanced themselves from Patricia, tired of her constant criticism now revealed as hypocrisy. Others reached out to Emma, offering small gestures of respect they had never shown before. Guests who once whispered about the slap now spoke of how truth had surfaced in the most unexpected way. Emma noticed a shift even in her neighbors, less judgment, more quiet nods of understanding. Patricia, once the center of every gathering, withdrew into silence, her influence shrinking as Emma's dignity finally stood tall. Emma sat alone on the porch one evening, the quiet far softer than the chaos of that party. She thought about how quickly judgment had turned against her, only to swing back once the truth emerged. She and Mark had agreed to rebuild on honesty, no more hidden debts or quiet lies. Watching Patricia retreat into the background, Emma realized the slap hadn't broken her marriage, it had exposed what was already cracked in the family. If this story has touched your heart, please consider subscribing. Your support truly means the world to us.